Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your email questions and comments, dj@ArtistFirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, D-Man. And that was one of the most important things that happened to us today.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Interestingly enough, Margaret, was it important?
Depends on your perspective. If it's pure function, yes.
Well, I want to stick with what you just said. Our topic tonight is importance, and it was sort of engendered by something we heard Tolle talking about, because Eckhart is very pithy. And to paraphrase, we'll come back to Eckhart in a little bit, but to paraphrase him, he said that your sense of importance will change over time. Your sense of what is important will change over time as you continue in your journey of, let's say, becoming more of a truly conscious being. But we thought, well, that's interesting, and the way he phrased it, which again we'll get back to in just a little bit, was interesting. But the underlying question of, what is important immediately comes with the answer that you just gave. Well, it depends. It's kind of relative to you, and everyone kind of says, oh yeah, this something which is important to me might not be important to you, and vice versa. And I think that's correct if you want to measure importance amongst peoples. It's very difficult because in the same way that I love my mother or we love our kids, or they're very important to us. But then if you hear, just being a normal human being, and you hear about something that happened to someone else's kids, you go, oh, that's terrible. And if you know them, you might feel a more of a sense of loss or of pain, shared pain or shared loss. And you might, if you're a compassionate person or a person who is more inclined to extend themselves, you might reach out to them, and try to connect and be present for them in their troubles. But in truth, the relative importance is in itself important, because if everything was as important to you as your own child, then in essence nothing would be, right? It's like if everybody's a superhero, then nobody is. If everything is equally important, then really nothing is. There's no scale.
Mm.
And amongst peoples, as you go out into society, you find a tremendous variety or tremendous variation of what is important from one to the next. They're sort of general ones, right? The one I just mentioned. The more distant a relationship is, the less important it is to you, with notable exceptions. But when we start to think about what matters to us, it's always, well, who's close to me? What have I invested my time in? What is something which I cherish? So it's very ego focused. It's very I centered. And so that question you just gave is the immediate question when somebody says, well, is it important? And you say,
yes, it depends. And what is it depending on? So it's evaluating what's going on in that moment. And there are degrees of urgency. So, again, importance, which is a concept that you try to teach little ones that, well, this is more important than that right now, because this is going to be required sooner than that. Well, you're going to have to answer for this sooner than you answer for that.
Yes. Or you would try to instill a sense of importance in younger people, because, again, relative, a cookie or a toy may be of desperate importance to the 2-year-old, but yet the fact that if they were to eat this cookie, perhaps they would spoil their dinner. If they were to play with this toy, perhaps someone else would get angry because they couldn't. It doesn't really matter to them too much.
No, not at all. But being able to look at it, and it's interesting when they had done this study where they had little children in a room with a cake.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And they were told that they cannot touch it or eat any part of it. And some did, and some didn't. And when they were asked, did you touch that cake? There's the concept of relative importance. Should I tell the truth? Am I going to get in trouble more if I tell the truth or if I don't tell the truth? And according to the children, it's just like, well, I won't tell the truth because then I won't get in trouble. No, I didn't touch it.
If you press them on it, it was a wonderful study because of course all the kids were videotaped, and so it was very amusing to watch them, touch the cake. Sometimes eat the cake. Sometimes they would sniff it, just. And then when someone would, the authority figure would come back. But I think as far as importance is concerned, what wasn't important to them was the direction. The direction was, don't touch the cake, and they they were asked to promise not to, and then they were on their own recognizance. They were left alone. The video cameras rolling, but they weren't aware of that. So the importance of saying saying you will do or won't do something was outweighed by the opportunity or the desire to have a slice of this delicious, delicious cake. And so that's another good point, Margaret. Is what's happening there is that your stated value for something, your agreement or your promise, is oftentimes not an absolute thing. It can morph. It can very quickly change into, well, I know I said I would, or I know I agreed that I would do what X, Y, or Z, but I really want. So the story, the ego story, comes right in and changes the importance, the immediacy of the opportunity to have a slice of cake when no one's watching. And then you said it too when they were called on it afterwards, the immediacy of, well, should I tell the truth? I'm supposed to tell the truth. I've said I would tell the truth. Or should I just make up a convenient and a much more important to me to not get caught and maybe not get in trouble.
In trouble, yeah. Like the cat did it.
The cat did it, or I don't know. It was like that. There was a lot of. If you want to be amused by something, I'm sure you could find it with a quick search, and it's a very amusing little video.
It's the study of young children, and you don't have to teach a child to lie.
No.
That was the premise.
Right.
If they feel that they need to do it, they will.
And go ahead.
And it's interesting to see because they're sitting there and you're looking at what perspective they're using to make this judgment call. Some of them were told not to and they didn't do it. And some of them were like, as you said, they went over and they sniffed at it. or they put their tiny little finger and touch the frosting.
Right.
And then it's like, well, did you touch the cake? No.
Yeah.
It's the old I touched the frosting.
Touched the frosting. I sniffed it. So this is interesting because again, the point you make is that we're, I don't want to shift topics or topic slide into everyone is a born liar, but we are born with a relative sense of importance. What matters to us oftentimes changes on a moment by moment basis, and sometimes what's important is to appear to be good rather than actually be good. So the appearances, and this kind of plays into some of the social media things. So again, I want a topic slide. So our topic is really what is important and why is it important. So I want to pull back from the question of, let's say, absolutes, of absolute importance. There are some absolutes. Your next breath should be absolutely important to you, because if you don't take it, you're not going to continue your existence. And in moments of great stress, you can find that your sense of importance of the other is incredibly heightened. You see it when people are in trouble and others really sacrifice themselves or put themselves in great danger because they feel that bond, that commonality. All of a sudden that person is you. You identify with them. And that's what totally is kind of sniping around here, this idea of identity. Importance is ascribed to what you identify with, what you see your own self in, your ego in, your I self in. And that's why it's so relative, because it's what do I, again, ego, what do I like? What do I think is important? What do I love? I have a relationship with, what I own, what I've spent my time on. And these are all what Tully calls the little I.
Right. And again, going back to the children, you're developing that concept of I. What is included in your I as opposed to another's, and what your tendencies are as opposed to your brother or your sister, what interests you as opposed to your brother and your sister. We're all truly individuals, and the ability to explore aspects of yourself and those that you love are the reason that we have relationship. Some relationship we might not really want to be involved in, and others we just, I love you. This seems to be who you are right now. Okay.
Well, but again, back to importance, when you have a relationship, you invest yourself in something. And, relationships are important in general. So you could say, you can see a commonality of importance in relationships. So, and you see it reflected in society at large. The society tends to honor and defend relationships, whether they're contracts or bonds of marriage or whatever. And so the formal recognition of relationships is because we see that individually each one of us has a certain importance that we ascribe to our relationships. And then we can see, let's say more collectively or more broadly, that even though I don't have a relationship with your significant other, I can see that your relationship is very similar and of the same level of importance and needing the same level of, let's say, defense or recognition as mine. So this is where you find that there's a certain parallelism. You can look at other people's relationship to their things, whatever they are, and say, oh yeah, I may not want to own this thing, but I can see that you own it, and therefore there's a relationship between you and the thing of ownership or value, and that I would like to defend that in the sense that I would like, it's do unto others as you would have them do to you. You look at the other and say, well, I wouldn't want somebody to take away my cookie, so therefore I'm going to make sure that all people's cookies, in quotes, are equally defended and valued. But we're still going. I think we're still going around the mark here, because what Tolle does is he sits back and he says, okay, let's not talk about broad importance. Let's talk about what's important to you, the individual, and why. Why is it important to you? And the sense of you, your individuality, your ego, it's important because you identify with it. People see themselves. You can see this all the time, Margaret. People see themselves in their cars and in their stuff. It's like, well, I have a nice car, so I must be nice. And I have a nice house, so I must be nice. And I dress nicely, so I must be nice. So I identify myself as a certain type of person by the possessions, perhaps, that I have, or by the titles that I've gathered, or the amount of money I have. All these external reference.
Or how many likes you get.
How many likes you get. That's a perfect one. All these external reference of importance. And when you say to yourself that I'm a good person if I get 100 likes or 101 likes or more likes than you, and that the importance of that looms so large that I will do, let's say anything to get more likes. Because to the extent that it reinforces what? It reinforces the ego. It reinforces the sense of identity, the sense of self. And the negative reinforcement, too. If I don't get these things, or if somebody tries to take these things away, then I feel less, and I feel injured, and I feel I this, I that. And then it can engender, of course, emotions.
Right. It goes deeply into a person's method of interacting with the outside world. And when you look at it, you realize that a person is putting together this concept and its concepts of who they believe they are. And they very carefully take them in and build these concepts into an internal mental form of themselves. So I do this. I'm edgy, so therefore I want this certain type of race car. Or I'm fast, or I'm quick. I'm
powerful.
Right, powerful. Or, you get the other end of the spectrum of, well, I'm a blue person, or I'm a pink person. They identify themselves according to color, which I thought was kind of interesting. Colors that they like. Oh, you like blue, I like blue.
Right.
So we must be simpatico.
Right. And I like what you just said, is that they're building up an internal form. It truly is a construct of ego, of identity, which actually has a specific look and sound and all these various attributes and components, which you maintain very, very carefully. It's a carefully constructed, and as we said before, it's better that it looks good than it is good. It looks like it's doing, that's fine, as long as it all looks good. So it's all about appearances.
Or perception. Like with music, people like certain genres of music, but when you hear someone who's truly talented, it brings it to a whole other level.
But I mean, yes. But it's this idea of this carefully curated sense of what? Sense of of self as separate. This self can be criticized separately. Oh, I always do this and I always do that. So there's an audience within. This is all within your head now. This is all within the fat globe here. There's the self, this carefully constructed, curated self, which has many things which are very important and some things which are absolutely important. And then there's the audience, which is all still inside the fat room, the fat globule here, looking at the self and criticizing the self and giving the self things to do and appreciating the self and saying, oh, what self, you're so good and you're so wonderful and everyone loves you. You have 10 million likes today and 10 million likes tomorrow. So there's a great theater in the round inside the head with the ego, the carefully curated appearances, and then the audience of this play. And then that ego is also, when it interacts, it's always, that's the one we have to face outward. That's our outward-looking face that we show everybody. People say, oh, I have this face and that face and the other face. Those are all ego fragments or I fragments.
Right. And people do that because they are mentally qualifying what they think this particular situation calls for.
Mm.
I need to put on a face that is more this or that, or, depending upon who it is that they are speaking with.
Yes.
And it has a lot to do with wanting to feel included in a group.
Right.
So they learn that there are certain surface qualifications that if I have this or I say things a certain way, then I'm part of this particular group. It struck me, this was a while back, but when we used to go, we had a friend who used to do shows in different museums and showing different works. And it always struck me as we were going through the museum that there was a certain clique that would stay together or be together and be considered, they're the it crowd. These are the ones that, this is the crowd you want to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they distinguish between what they do and what other artists were doing, or other people looking at the works, was there were certain catchphrases that were used.
Mm-hmm.
To look at the painting, to perceive it a certain way, to describe it a certain way. It was very interesting to me because I was not part of that. So I didn't mind not being part of that. But the observation was fascinating because it's a person-to-person kind of conversation. And you were either included or you were not.
And very importantly, the other is always necessary for the ego.
Right. That part, by the way, was another thing I thought was fascinating, because it didn't matter to me whether or not that was used or this lingo was used. I was looking at things according to how I perceived the piece in front of me. And you're sitting there, you continue on with the day, and you're like, okay, let's go get a bite to eat. And you go to a restaurant, and you're being seated, and the next thing you know, the people that basically were excluding you from whatever their conversation was basically intruded on your table, saying, oh no, we're with them. And they wanted to continue this kind of dynamic. And I'm sitting going, I would like to sit and eat my meal. And because of that interference, it changed the dynamic of the table, and the waitress that was going to serve us pulled away and said, no, I'm not serving them. I thought that was fascinating.
Well, it's a specific instance. But what was happening, I would say broadly, what was happening there is that it was very important, let's say pick an individual, that they have an audience. And the first audience is the audience within their head.
Right.
So they're carefully curated. And as you mentioned, I think just a few moments ago, every carefully curated ego construct has its own room in their head, in the heads of this, and you can bring up each individual one as you wish them to be used, like in essence puppets in a play. So you imbue a certain amount of life or certain mask, if you will, with your energy at the moment, and then this is the one you're wearing at this moment. This is important that I look this way and say these things. And find the other. The other can be a construct in the head. It can be those who are individuals who are around you that you're plugging into your story, because they really aren't being treated as individuals or people. They're really just getting plugged into the story. And the important thing is that ego gratification. The real importance, the thing of absolute importance, is that they be seen to be what they wish to be seen to be, and that the ego finds an other to say, well, this is not what we are. This is what we are. This is not what we are, and we feed this ego reinforcement. I am, whatever it is, a great artist, or I have a great critic, or whatever you want to. It doesn't really matter in broad, but in specific, these ego constructs require maintenance and care and feeding and constant stroking and constant reinforcement.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting. So, Tolle kind of prosecuted this argument a little bit. Basically said that the ego needs things which are important to it. It needs its own relationship to itself to be important, and the relationship it's trying to build is saying to find an other, to make the differences as stark as possible, and then to take what it can as reinforcement from the other. You, in the story you just related, were a necessary component. It could have been someone else, but in that moment you were the necessary component. You were the other. And let's just say one person, whoever's trying to curate this ego construct, had to run over physically and in essence mentally, run over to you. And it didn't matter what was actually going on, because this is an unconscious state. It has nothing to do with the now. It has to do with the need for the audience, the other, to plug in, to have somewhere that their ego construct can shine and be reflected to itself, and find others to shun or to use as the differentiator.
Right. Well, they needed a space.
Yes.
And the space is done by the person they basically feel superior over.
Or they want that person to provide them a space. And in that way, I'm reminded of what you were saying a few weeks back. It's very narcissistic behavior. The idea that my thing of importance is important to me, and I need you to validate it.
Right. It's because this is the world. My importance and my considerations. This is the world.
Well, you know what? Let's take a little break away from all this important stuff and go back to the studio and find out if that's important. And then when we come back on the other side, we'll talk more about importance.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Starting to think about care, but not ready to deal with home care agencies? INF Care is providing an innovative option that is easy to use and effective. INF Care offers a remote at-home concierge service as an option for home care. At the same price point of having a caregiver visit twice a week, our solution allows you to remotely connect with our staff daily, get regular video check-ins, and get help with reminders. Overall, a system that supports your independence. Available now in Arlington and Fairfax County. At $200 a month, INF Care provides the technology and the customer service. To contact us, call 571-422-5730 or connect with us at inf.care.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hello, this is Highway 59 recording artist Randy Moore, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman. This show makes you important. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
We hope that's not true, because you're important even if you don't listen. Anyway, I am Michael Lyons, and we are talking about importance tonight. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But Margaret, would you, if you have it in front of you, would you read the Tolle quote? Because I like that quote, actually. It's a nice one. If you don't have it in front of you, we'll wait a momento.
Okay. Alrighty. Only one thing is of absolute importance, and that is your connectedness with being. Eckhart Tolle.
Yes, and here's the, this is the kind of the point we've been working our way up to. Importance has degrees. We've been talking about that a little bit amongst people and within your own self. But when the ego is involved, there are things which are absolutely important to it, most of which have to do with feeding itself. So the ego has an appetite. And the ego's appetite requires the other. It requires the other, in essence, to kind of to feed on. And in the sense that the ego is a narcissist, it uses narcissistic and sociopathic behaviors or mechanisms in order to feed itself, because it really doesn't care about anything else except itself and its appearances. And we all know people who have multiple faces, many, many, many different ego fragments, but they all have the same appetite. When they're in evidence, they want to be fed. So the ego has a sense of absolute importance, but its absolute importance is relative to only one thing: its own appetites, its likes and dislikes, its I-ness. And it needs the other to feed upon. So now enter Tolle, and he says, okay, well, this is what people, when you consider all these things, when you're an unconscious person, and you're starting to realize that the ego is not the be-all and the end-all, the ego is causing you suffering, and you start to become aware of this, you have this awareness of the importance the ego assigns to itself. And what Tolle is saying is that those absolutes, as you develop, have to become less and less absolute. They have to become, yes, maybe important. It's a good idea to eat every day. It's a good idea to have a nice car or have a nice relationship or get all your likes or whatever. But to the extent that you become aware that the ego is using these things, the other, to feed and to feed itself and to cause you more suffering at the end, you being the actual consciousness, the actual being, you have to migrate from these absolutes to something much less existential, much less concerned with the actual care and feeding and maintenance of the ego form.
Well, I'd like to go to that mechanism itself, where one can begin to understand that your mind, which is basically what is being constructed at this point by the ego choices, all right? Your mind can only see what it contains. It can only identify it if you put it in there. So if the ego was putting these forms in, then it's forms that stem from that ego. So if your mind can only see what it contains, then it's the realization that the mind is recognizing reflections of patterns within itself. And when it recognizes these patterns, like what we said before, oh, you like blue, I like blue. It forms relative importance. That is the definition of relative importance. I want to be with people who like the same things I like, which is natural. That's normal because we are social beings. But it's understanding that that is all relative importance. If another person likes red and you guys like blue, it doesn't mean they're any less than you. But the attitude can be there that, well, you're different, you like red. And it's like, I just happen to like red. What importance are you gauging? What are you equating that pattern with? And in one way, it's blue is good and red is bad. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like you become aware of what it is you happen to be doing, because you are mistaking relative importance for absolute importance. At that point, your perspective is too small.
Well, and just as a definition in terms, the ego's, from the ego's, let's say, point of view, it only sees things that it wants as absolutely important. And I think when you say mistaking things of relative importance, is that's the more consciousness view. And the consciousness view, as you just stated, liking red or liking blue should have nothing to do with the being state. In fact, the being state can encompass both. To this moment of now, blue looks nice. This next moment of now, red looks nice. I find both those things to be pleasing and to be part of my experiential being at this moment. Wonderful. The ego doesn't do those things. It mistakes the identity of I like blue and blue is good and I like things that are blue because I want to find people that like things that are blue and those people, the bad people that like other colors. That's where the absolute importance of the relativeness of and it's no longer the moment of now anymore. It's a completely contrived.
Right. Well, it's understanding that we as humans have a tendency to do these things and raise this concept up to a point of almost life and death. I mean, if you're talking about looking at some of the say the Bloods and the Crips, okay, they have colors. Yes. That they wear. And if you're wearing a color outside of theirs and you're in their territory, they will take you out.
Right. Truly life and death. But I think the other point you had, which was perfect, was that the ego sees its preference as existential, which is why they're absolutes.
Well, that example where they transform their colors into real markers and say, yeah, I am red or I am blue, and if you're not, then I kill you.
Right. And the transformation of what is, let's just say it perfectly well, the meaningless distinctions which the ego thrives upon and which it turns into absolutes of existence or non-existence of life for those who are like me and those I like, and death, truly plugging any other into the spot where I will use whatever power I have to destroy the other, because it reinforces the meanness of me.
Well,
And,
they go into that's who we are. We
Right.
are this gang. That's it.
Right.
And their identity.
And this is extreme, but that same dynamic plays out in every ego interaction, because the ego sees its identity as an absolute good, and that any attack upon it needs to be responded with, this overwhelming rejection.
Right. It can't take anything else except what it deems to be part of their world.
Right.
And if you interfere with that, you have become the enemy.
Mm.
Which is, it's extreme. But the tendency, again, you're making the ego is making these forms in the mind, and they're setting it in stone, if you would. This is how we judge what is in our world and what is good and what is bad. And unless you reflect the patterns I've chosen back to me,
Mm-hmm.
then you are bad or to be destroyed or to be disregarded. Maybe that's a better way to term it when you're talking about just interactions between one person and another on a more civil level.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good way of putting it too. I mean, the ego can operate in "quote unquote" a civil way, but it always still sees things in absolutes. And like the interaction you had with the folks in the museum, they could care less, or apparently, that you were not at that moment reinforcing their egos. They needed the other. You were a convenient source of the other at that moment. And I know everyone should be familiar with this. When someone rolls up to you and puts you into their story, because you can feel it, even if you don't have the immediate awareness of it, you can feel that you're being used in some way, and it sometimes will evidence itself in sort of an annoyance, like I'm eating here, like you had the reaction. We're trying to have a nice, and then you see the evidence of it, completely oblivious of, to the egos that are using you in the story. Your waitress was annoyed enough to say, "Well, I'm not serving these crowd. They're a pain in my neck." So the ego tends to not just look for the other, but it tends to create the other, create the annoyed person, create a situation where the ego is at the center, and we all know this. The ego wants to be at the center, and the whole world is thinking about the ego. Didn't you have that experience when you were in school, where the girl it was in the cafeteria, where the girl, I believe, was thinking that you and your friends were laughing and talking about her, when in fact you had nothing on your mind that is even remotely concerned with her, but yet the ego sees an interaction and immediatpoint says,
"It's about me.
They must be talking about me."
Yeah.
It's all about me.
Well, the point I'd like to bring up, though, is the reason why that happens. And it's usually because they are not confident in themselves.
That's true.
There's a fear that suddenly, I'm not going to be liked, or I'm going to be talked about, or, things are not going to line up with the projection I'm trying to put out there. There'll be a contrary something if you do that. And don't do that, because you're going to to offend me. You're going to hurt me. And you're sitting there going, what are you talking about? Because it was a fabrication in the mind. Complete fabrication in the mind. To the point that, just that incident of the girl, we were laughing over, it was some biology, something or other, where we had to figure out what was wrong with this plant. Why wasn't it growing properly? And we were laughing because it was pot-bound. It literally had no room, and that's why it was ill. And I'm just like, is this the best you guys can do on trying to make us think what is wrong with this plant? And so we were laughing as a group, and I remember when she came over, she started shoving me. And when she shoved me the second time, I looked, I said, what's up? She said, you're laughing at me. I'm like, we're laughing at that plant. And this, of course, made her mortified.
Well, as we all know, the ego is extremely needy and fragile. The ego constructs are made out of, fragile and easily damaged things.
And, it's again, if I had realized that was going on, I could have reassured her, but I had no idea at that point.
Right.
Again, you're focused on the moment and the task at hand. And again, you're leading a group in whatever, so you're concerned with the group, but not the people outside the group.
Well, right, but the ego doesn't really care, right? That particular focus of the ego was that in that situation, the ego wanted to play the victim. No matter what the actual reality was, the ego wanted to be a victim. The ego wanted those people who had plugged into its little play to be laughing at it, and then to let them know, shoving one of them, and telling them that they're offending you, and then have them apologize, perhaps, or as you said, reassure, comfort, whatever. All that was all part of the same ego reinforcement. So I don't want to go down too far into that, but it really comes down to that the ego has, as you said just before, it has assigned existential, absolute importance to its, to itself at the center of the whole universe, and that all things that are within its perception are focused or in some way, concerned with the ego, with itself.
Well, this person, this girl, what struck me was the fact that if that's the case, then the pattern that she has within her mind is that she gets mocked.
Yes.
And that needs to be acknowledged, that this is a pattern.
Right. But I mean, her specific case could be helped. Let's talk about her specific case. So her specific case is she wants to be a victim in this case. The ego wants to be a victim. And so it assigns this absolute importance to the victimhood and wants to plug all these things. And then perhaps in bringing her into consciousness and out of this ego form, you could say to this ego that the important thing is that you're with us now. The important thing is that we want you to be here now and not worry about what happened a moment ago or what's going to happen in the future. So you bring the ego to the now, and it lessens it. You say, well, the absolute need that you have is not an absolute at all. The true thing, as Tolle says here, the absolute importance is that you connect with the current moment. The current moment was, we're all kind of enjoying the fact that this sad, this sad plant is having, is what these folks gave us to, to complete this project, and join us. One thing that the little monk, which I could never remember his name, the Japanese monk, was able to do with the "Is that so?" was to diffuse the absolute need of the ego to have the other, the evil person who did this thing to the daughter, and say, okay, I'm not going to play your game, but I'm going to meet the actual in the moment being need. A child needs to eat, and you're thrusting this upon me. Okay, I accept that. I take this child. I, without any ego involved, say, well, it's important that it is of absolute importance that this child eat. Not that your ego is stroked or that this situation
who's right, who's wrong. This
doesn't matter.
The need right now is called forth, and this baby needs to eat or be changed or whatever. The many needs that an infant will have.
And what you just said is so important. The ego wants to know who's right and who's wrong is the absolute important most thing, and it wants to be right and it wants you to be wrong. But the baby that needs to eat is the true being state, absolute. This being will die otherwise.
Yes. And
we've absolutely reached
the end of our show.
Well, I guess that's important.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.